and welcome to the Make Life Merry webinar for the week.
We are so excited to have you all here.
Yes, and not just you guys watching, but we also have Dr. Rach, who we're super pumped to talk to. She's going to answer all your questions and give you so much advice. She has a wealth of knowledge, and we're just super grateful that she's offered her time and expertise to share with all of us.
Yes, we've got some great questions lined up, so I'm really excited to hear Dr. Rach's opinion on all of them.
Yeah, and I think we just want to give a huge shout out to all our Make Life Merry makers, because you guys have been going amazing this week and have been having some epic wins. I mean, reading through the Facebook comments,
it's so inspiring.
We're blown away every single day. And so huge claps to you guys, because it is all you. You guys are making these changes, and these positive results are what you're getting. So yay for that. So let's get into it, I think.
Yes.
We're going to introduce you to Rach. I'm just going to read out her bio. You've probably heard lots about her already because we've been talking about her in the group. But I'm going to read it out, and then we're going to pass it over to Rach, and she's going to share her story. If anyone is tuning in live, make sure that you're commenting and saying hello so we know that you're here. But yeah, we'll get into it. So Dr. Rach Wyndham is a medical doctor and naturopath. Rachel has dedicated her life to learning about wellness and how to reestablish balance and a sense of peace. She's here to simplify health and to educate and inspire you to make small, easy changes that create a massive impact on your quality of life. So welcome, Dr. Rach. Yay!
Thanks, girls. Oh, it's so lovely to be here. And just listening to you and seeing your big smiley faces, I just think, oh, yay, I'm part of something that's really amazing and powerful. So thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you.
Pleasure. Yes, thank you so much.
So do you want me to have a quick, I know we've got some amazing questions. So
yeah, we'd love to get your bio first. Tell us a little bit about you and where you've come from and your journey, and I mean how you got from what you're doing, how you got to what you're doing today, because what you're doing is bloody amazing.
Yeah, it can be. So yeah, look, I don't know. It's one of those things, where do you start? But basically, most people, when I say that I'm a naturopath and a GP, they say, well, that's a bit confusing, or how do you do both? And so look, in a short version of my story, I grew up eating whole foods, and we had chickens, and my brother had allergies, and so we had to have goat's milk and no dairy. And my aunt was a naturopath in the 70s, and for me, I just thought that was a normal way that you looked after your health, that it was balanced, that you were careful with what you ate, and that you considered all aspects of sort of mind, body, emotion. So when I left school and I started studying naturopathy, I had a clinic and I worked in health retreats, and I love retreat work. I think that's something where you can just separate yourself from all the stress of life and really make some massive changes. And I worked in shops, so I learnt, the questions that people asked and the products that were around, and everything was quite fringe then. Early, late 80s, early 90s, and then when I sort of graduated in 90s, it was really alternate. So when I set up my clinic, I did so in a big medical practice. So there were psychologists, and there was many GPs, and there was some specialists. And I thought, this is perfect. I'm, the naturopath and nutritionist who can really support and be a team. And I'm all for absolute teams have to be there to help you move, into wellness. And so what you girls do with that motivation and showing that, eating plan and what you can really do to change and have a positive attitude makes a big difference. So I set up my clinic, and I found that there was a lot of resistance, that GPs were resistant, that, the whole medical fraternity were distrusting of naturopathy. And being young and full of energy and naive, and I thought, well, what do they know that I don't know? And I wanted to be able to have the best care for my patients. I wanted to be able to order pathology and speak to specialists and do the tests that I needed to do. So I actually went back to study medicine, and I did my my undergrad and my postgrad medical, I did intern year, residency year, and I worked through all the hospital specialties and then did my specialty GP training. And slowly along the way, I took on a lot of the philosophy of naturopathy, so that our bodies are incredibly powerful and divinely, smart and intuitive, and they can heal themselves if we get out of our own way and take away some of those blocks. But also the safety aspects and the practical aspects of, we're all born sometimes with, genetic dispositions and deficiencies and issues that, modern medicine has a few answers for. So you can sometimes use antibiotics safely, and you can screen for cancers and be safe, and take aggressive treatment when it's necessary. So I've come full circle, and it was a long journey, and there's a lot of personal aspects in there as well. So I had my 3 girls through that process. I've got 3 beautiful daughters. One's now in uni and one's just starting school, so they're all different ages and challenges. Yeah, and they're cool, but I also know what it's like to be a mum and a working mum, and someone who loves health but has to still get through this life, and there's lots of corners we cut. So I got to a point working the hospital, working shifts, and also in that environment where there's a lot of heartache and there's a lot of pain and suffering. And I think emotional health for me is such a big passion, because I feel that when we're not being open and vulnerable and really in touch with ourselves, that even the best food we eat or all the supplements in the world really just don't do justice. So I had a really stressful time, and I got to burnout, and I needed to take a break. And that's where I ended up getting online and finding all this really cool teaching and being able to write and blog and sort of chilling out a little bit and not having to be striving and working and in clinic. And I was a much happier and more friendly and more open doctor. So this is where I am this year. I'm teaching and being available for webinars and talking to your beautiful people. So that's
so amazing, Dr. Rach.
So amazing. I love that it's like the natural side and the medical side. I think like we're huge believers that there's a place for all of that for optimal health. So it's awesome to talk to you, and I'm so excited to hear more.
Yeah, I think I was writing down some notes like as I was listening, and especially about like emotional health and things like that. I mean, I hope we can have some time to delve into that, because I'm super excited to hear more, and I know that there's so much more than just like feeding your body the right thing and exercising when it comes to health. But we did get some questions from our Make Life Merrymakers today, and let's jump straight into them, I think, because we've got some goodies.
Yes.
Cool.
So
okay, let's do it.
Kylie and Sarah both have Hashimotos, and they're wondering what you would recommend to manage it. They've both heard that our paleo lifestyle and increased exercise can reduce the symptoms.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So for those who don't have Hashimoto's or haven't heard of it, so this is a condition that affects the thyroid gland, and there's about 5% of the Australian population that have a hypothyroid or underactive thyroid. So there's massive numbers. And we all get to a point in our life where we think we're tired, our skin's dry, our hair's falling out, we're a little overweight, we sluggish. So the thyroid is our driver of our energy and our metabolism. And we'd all sometimes like for our doctor to say, yes, it's your thyroid. It's not just your diet and, the way you live. And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But for the 5% of the population who have a low thyroid, that is exactly what happens. So, their fuel and energy system is just quite low. Now, one of the reasons that this happens, and in 70% of those people, it's an autoimmune reason. So they actually test for their antibodies against their thyroid gland, and the body, for some reason, has decided that this is foreign tissue and it makes some antibodies against it. So the body's really fighting our own gland. It's fighting our own messages that tell us to drive and produce energy. Now, Most of the general medical treatment for low thyroid is just to replace your thyroid hormone, the thyroxine. And we just test the level, and then we replace that and we put it back to normal. And you should ideally just have normal power and normal metabolic rate. But it's very, very difficult to treat autoimmune conditions. So most people go and seek some naturopathy or nutrition or some alternate therapies. And there's lots of studies that show that there's a link with the gut and the microbiome in the gut and the development of autoimmune conditions. So the chromosomes 6, 8, and 5 are the ones that are linked with that Hashimoto's autoimmune, but it's not always genetic. So there is a component of a weakness there for most people, but we talk about something that's epigenetic, meaning there's a stress on the body that sends it all, going off down a negative way. And some of the things that have been connected are the gluten intolerance, so not necessarily celiac, but the protein in wheat, so the gliadin protein, which seems to bypass the gut and gets into the circulation, and the immune system thinks, hang on, this is not right, this shouldn't be here, and it sends a big attack off. So gluten is one of the really strong links. Wheat, things like heavy metal toxicity. So it seems that metals have a really high affinity for the thyroid gland. It's a really sensitive, high circulation area. So, mercury, aluminium, cadmium, those sort of toxins, which in our environment now, we're exposed to a lot of those. I've just written a couple of notes here as well. So metals include our essential minerals. So if you think of zinc and copper and molybdenum, they're all metals as well, but they're the ones that we essentially need for our health. So sometimes we can have a copper and a zinc imbalance, and that can really affect our autoimmune antibodies and our thyroid as well. And the last one were parasites in the gut. So if we pick up a bug in our gut that just carries along with us and causes lots of grief in there, that slowly the immune system is just so overwhelmed sort of dealing with that constantly that it hasn't got a chance to balance everything else out. So those sort of things are, they seem a challenge, but often they're quite achievable in hunting for those answers. So seeing a good practitioner and getting some metal tests, getting some mineral levels tested, eliminating gluten for a certain while. And I guess that's where paleo is amazing. So being able to eliminate the wheat and the grains and some of the things that trigger autoimmunity, and just being able to have lovely good meats and vegetables, and it seems to improve a lot of people with autoimmune disease and thyroid disease.
Wow, that was so interesting.
Mind's officially blown.
Yeah, wow. I'm sure Kylie and Sarah got a lot from that, so that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Great.
And there's heaps more we can talk about with the conversion of our active thyroid, T3 and T4, and using iodine. And, those things are really amazingly effective, but they're probably a little complex to just chat about here. So finding a good practitioner, can really help you get to that. And there's heaps that can be done.
Yeah, well, because you have an iodine deficiency, and it's because it's so important that you're not overtaking that iodine, because then it can have a negative effect. Is that right, Rach?
Exactly, yeah. So they're talking about 30% of Australians, and more the eastern seaboard, are iodine deficient. So we need iodine as one of the building blocks for our thyroid hormones, and it's really important for that conversion of the inactive T4, which is the thyroxine that we get given, to the active T3. But when you have an autoimmune thyroid condition, the iodine can actually overstimulate, and it can make things worse. So eating kelp and having lots of sushi and all these foods that have got high iodine can be a real problem. So it's important that you get those aspects balanced and correct. But it comes back to whole food and knowing that we've got all the nutrients we need, like B5 and vitamin C, and those things are essential in building those building blocks for hormones.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so interesting. Sounds like we could do a whole webinar on just that subject.
Yeah, definitely.
We will.
We'll move on to the next question, and that one was from Teresa. And Teresa suffers from a deficiency in vitamin B12, as well as anemia, and I have the same thing. So I'm really interested to hear, Dr. Rach, what you'd suggest in treating that.
Yeah, absolutely. When we do testing, and B12 is something that's commonly tested for. So B vitamins generally we get, quite easily in a whole diet. But B12 is unique because you need something in your gut called intrinsic factor, which is produced in the gut for it to be absorbed. So you can absorb your B1 and B2 and B5 and B9 and folate, all the other Bs. And they're all water-soluble vitamins. So it means that, when you take a B vitamin and then you're peeing bright yellow for the next day. So, you can't overdose on B vitamins because they're eliminated out of the urine. So that's a great thing, although you then need them again quite quickly. So you've got to be, consistently replenishing your B vitamins. So, if someone's B12 deficient, there's two things I think. Firstly is that they're probably generally all the Bs deficient. So if we live on a diet that is processed and sugars and grains and, we don't have a great gut health, then it's likely that we don't have a lot of our vitamins. The other thing is that if we don't have our intrinsic factor working very well in our stomach, then we can't absorb and get our B12 very well either. Now, you hear a lot about using lemon juice or apple cider vinegar in water first thing and stimulating your stomach acid. Our stomach acid is reduced when we have caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, processed food, sugar, and when we stress. So you can imagine that we get a beautiful meal and it's full of protein and we're about to eat it. So if you're worried or you're on the phone or you're running for work or you have a caffeine with it, all of those things are going to inhibit the amount of, firstly, the acid in the stomach and then all the enzymes that are produced for this meal to be assimilated and broken down and absorbed. So, B12 goes first, I guess. And it's essential for our nervous system function, for our brain function, for, the nerves. Neuropathies happen with serious B12 deficiency. So, and when it comes to anemia, obviously we need those iron and B12 and all the nutrients to create our beautiful red blood cells. So over time, it's just so low. The body does an amazing job at just keep going. And then eventually it just can't continue to make the essential elements that it has to.
My gosh. So what can we do with, is there some foods that we can make sure that we're eating that is going to help that? Or where do you start when you're talking about, the intrinsic factor? I've never heard of that. So how can we work on that and make it better?
I think it's really simply just making sure that you've got a good environment to put your food into. So having that stress-free mealtime where you're not on that fight and flight because when you're under cortisol and you're really stressed, then your body is not worried about digesting its food. It's trying to run from a tiger or, fight somebody. So all of its energy and its consciousness, I guess, goes into muscles and blood supply. And the digestion shuts down. So what we want to do is really consciously allow the digestive system to be working. So a calm environment where you eat your food and you chew it slowly and you stimulate the acid and the production of enzymes. And the foods, that's one thing to say that you have a 50-50 clean diet with a few little sneaky things in there, or if you have a 95% clean perfect paleo diet, or you can get to that point where it's 100% really fussy and perfect, and the more you stress about that, how much you actually going to absorb. So people put lots of water with their food, or they drink coffee with their food, or all of that just inhibits the ability to break down the proteins, to absorb the food correctly. And you might just have that weakness for the intrinsic factor itself, but it's just basics. It's just things.
Okay.
And
Well,
B12 injections. So you can go and have your B12 injection. And in my clinic, we do a combination Bs now. So it's not just the 12, it's B1, 2, 3, 6, and
okay.
9 together in a monthly, just an injection into your arm. And it boosts all your levels and you feel really great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to look into that. But definitely mindful eating. That's been one of
Yeah.
the topics that we've been discussing throughout the past 3 weeks. And it's something that we definitely are focusing on. I think lots of people are trying to focus on that as well. So it's great to know that it's got a lot of benefits to it. So I'm going to make sure I focus on it.
We'll move on to the next question, which comes from Kylie. And she wants to know a little bit more about adrenal fatigue, as well as anything she needs to focus on regarding vitamins and minerals. As she used to weigh over 150 kilograms, and she's well and truly into her weight loss journey and lost half her body weight. So
her goal is to lose half her body weight.
Her goal is to lose half her body weight.
Yeah.
So she's lost 30 plus kilos already.
Yeah. And she's been 5 months like trying to lose weight, eating paleo. And now she's just wanting to know about adrenal fatigue and like if there's anything that she should be focusing on to make sure she's keeping up her vitamins and minerals.
Sure. So let's start with adrenal fatigue, which is one of my absolute favorites because everyone wants to know about the sex hormones. So they want to know about estrogen, progesterone, they want to know about fertility and PMS and libido and all the fun stuff. And it's such a pyramid. So I'll pop a few slides in that you can put on the Facebook group that might be relevant to what we're talking about. But those critical things are at the top of the pyramid. So the ovaries and uterus and all that. I mean, I think we're talking mainly to the girls, but the testosterone and the gonad, that's still a really important part. But these are the tip of the pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid is our grounding, is what we have to have essentially perfect before we can move up to the gut and move up to the thyroid and then move up to the sex hormones, is our adrenal glands. So it's our cortisol, it's our stress response. It's I like the idea that our kidneys sit just behind in the small of our back. And our kidneys are about the size of our fists, and our little adrenal glands just sit on top. And they provide the cortisol, every day for everything we do. So the minute that you open your eyes in the morning, your cortisol at 7 a.m. should be at its peak. So you should have enough of this driving hormone to get through and do everything you need through the day. And slowly through the day, it drops down to about 5 or 6 p.m. And that's when your melatonin can come in and you can rest and go to sleep and have a good restful sleep. So what we do is that we wake up and we probably have some caffeine and then we have sugar and then we stress and we worry and we think all day and we're under threat. And our bodies feel like, we're going to die, really, when all it is performance in an exam or being at work or driving in the traffic or something that is not really a threat to our health. But our cortisol stays up here constantly through the day. Now, over time, you deplete your adrenal glands and you run out of cortisol. So you need vitamin C, you need B5, you need lots of nutrients to keep providing that amount of cortisol for the body. So what happens in adrenal fatigue? There's a few stages. So we get a boost of cortisol, we're stressed, we burn it off, and then we come back to normal. And that's how it should happen. But if we're constantly stressed and up here, we go into a phase 2 of adrenal exhaustion. And that's where we start to feel this wired and tired. So we're sort of anxious, we're on edge, and our heart races, and we feel a bit off, and that can go on for quite a long time. So that can be 6 months or years. And then eventually in that third phase of adrenal, so that's adrenal fatigue, and then adrenal exhaustion, your cortisol drops right down and you just can't get any. You wake up with really low levels, so you like dragging your bones out of bed and your muscles are sore and you've got a foggy head and you can't think. And at that point you start to get all the depressive symptoms as well. So that's extreme. You've really, really depleted your adrenal glands then. So it's a process of working back through those stages replenishing nutrients you need, taking time out and rest just so the body can catch up to itself, and taking those stressors off you. I've got a few beautiful books, and we won't go off on a tangent, but I always talk about these and come back. Like, this is one of them. This is from 1938, I think.
Wow.
And it's a modern medical counselor, but it's incredible because I love going back and talking about how they deal with menopause or PMT, or even how they used alkalizing diets to treat conditions, and sitz baths and Epsom salts. And so it's real medicine. It's like what naturopathic medicine is now. But one thing that isn't in that book, or there's an older one as well, is the word stress.
Oh my
so it wasn't a concept, which is amazing.
Wow.
But stress can be, it can be biological. So it can be an infection, it can be a parasite, it could be a virus, it could be a genetic. So there's a lot of things. It's not just what we think about as, oh, it's stressful to, live in this life. There's a lot of stresses that happen to us. So we've got to take them all into consideration with that. So that's adrenal fatigue, and that's cortisol. And this one, a really important one. So there's 2 circles on here, and the first top one, if anyone reading wants to have a look at this a little later down the track or pause that page, the very top of this is a food as a stressor, and that is sugar, oils, alcohol, caffeine, hydrogenated fats. So what it does is release insulin, allow weight deposits, fatty liver. It then stimulates serotonin, makes us feel good, so we get a nice kick and we feel happy, and then very quickly we drop and we crave. So we just drive a cortisol cycle with this constantly. So if we keep putting sugar in, we keep putting this caffeine in, we keep getting a nice pickup and a feel good, and then we do it again. And that's where adrenal fatigue begins. So that's a really important part of it.
But I think we got a lot from that question.
Oh my gosh.
It's like learning so much. Yes.
Just to find out how it happens.
Yeah, it's so fascinating.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So I think the second half of that question was what nutrients should we, I mean, that's such a great how losing that much weight is incredible.
I know, it's amazing.
The release of that emotion and all the choices that she experienced. I love that story. So I just think the body, is releasing everything it doesn't need. And if you're eating a whole diet, you're going to have all the nutrients that you need. So I wouldn't be worried about deficiency in someone that's losing weight. I'd be more worried about just ensuring there's good protein metabolism, because what happens with the cortisol is that it's anabolic. You burn up all your skeletal muscle and you use up all the good stuff, and you're depositing fat. So when you're doing the opposite, you've just got to have lots of water and keep clearing your kidneys and making sure that you stay quite alkaline. So alkalizing supplements are really good for that too.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. So that would that be like spirulina and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So all the greens, green barley, spirulina, chlorella, they all have that chlorophyll factor, which is a magnesium base. So plants love holding magnesium as their energy source. So we have iron, so we have red blood because we hold iron, and they hold magnesium. So they have that green factor, which is beautiful. So having lots of the green supplements is really great for that alkalizing.
Okay.
Wow.
Awesome.
Yeah, last week we spoke lots about magnesium, and that was really interesting. Again, Epsom salt baths, things like that. So
now we can boost all our greens.
Yeah, definitely. We'll move on to our next question, and that is from Laura. And Laura's asked if you have any advice on dealing with mercury toxicity. So Laura has a mouthful of mercury fillings but can't afford to have them removed. So she has had a flow-on effect of leaky gut and overloaded her liver. But what she has done is that she's cleaned up her diet and she's on some liver support supplements, but she's wondering if there's anything else she can add to that.
Okay. So It's a good question. I think it's something we should always be aware of, you know, our environmental toxins, and we can be eating clean and having, you know, shower chemicals, creams we rub on, you know, even air fresheners and things you see, candles that are not organic, or, you know, you're constantly exposed to a lot of these chemicals. Now, there's a lot of argument about whether the mercury in our mouths are stable, or whether they're giving off a lot of chemicals that can move into our bloodstream and into our tissue. So the way we test that is with hair analysis, and it's fairly reliable. It can be a little, you know, tricky because you have to get a sample that hasn't been colored and exposed to shampoo, and, you know, all of that has so much room for error. So we have done different hair analysis tests and found that some vary. So, you know, you need to take those sort of tests with a grain of salt and apply it to your symptoms, what you're experiencing. So if it's true mercury toxicity, you want to go very slow and careful if you're eliminating it. So the whole idea of detoxing, you know, is great in concept. People think, oh, I just detox and then I'll be nice and clean and healthy. But the body is an amazing processing plant. So if you're exposed to something, its job is to keep the blood in this really fine line of pH and certain nutrients and bicarb, and it will do anything it can to do that. So it will push out things into tissue and hide it away. It goes into bone, into thyroid, you know, and into our hair and our skin. So when we test our hair and skin, you can find where those are. So, you know, the last thing we want to do is start pounding the body with something that brings it all up, because you can feel really quite unwell. You can have really detoxification symptoms and headache and skin outbreaks and rashes, and, you know, the liver can be pounded with more than necessary. So slow and steady and lifelong, and, you know, look at one feeling at a time and just see, you know, is it stable or is it, you know, volatile and needs to be changed. And specialized dentists actually do that process where they put lots of antioxidants in, lots of vitamin C, and they do it in protective dams so they can remove that toxicity. But I wouldn't be too scared and panicked about all this mercury every day leaking in, because it is really fairly stable if they're intact fillings. So yeah, looking at healing the gut, number one, that will always allow that great absorption of good nutrients, and allowing the liver to have the right nutrients it needs, glutamine and all the pathways. And herbs are beautiful for just allowing it to continue its job. But the best thing for the liver is not to put anything else in there on top of it. So no processed sugar, no caffeine, no alcohol, no. And when I say no, you know, the standard is acceptable, healthy levels that we can manage and maintain. And the body will do everything it can to bring itself into the most healthy place that it can be. So we just let it do its job.
Yeah. And speaking of gut health, I mean, this has been a topic that's been brought up like so much over the past 3 weeks. I'd be really interested to just hear, like, what do you think are like the top 3, or like, you know, how can someone start focusing on their gut health? What are 3 things that our Make Life Merrymakers could do to, you know, really start that gut health healing process?
Yeah, a good question. 3. What would I put as my first 3? We've always looked at the gut like a garden. So I don't know if there's lots of gardeners out there, but it's a soil that has this beautiful fertile, you know, milieu. It's made up of lots of different bacteria, and it has to be a certain pH for things to grow. So you watch and you know your garden just doesn't grow. If you go and sterilize that soil, which can happen with an antibiotic or medication, nothing will grow. So then you think, well, I'll sterilize it and then I'll try and throw a probiotic back in. Well, it won't really hold there because the pH is wrong. So we really think of it like a garden, and you have to, it's a weed, seed and feed. So you're going in there and you've got to get rid of the weeds, number one. And that includes things like parasites or bugs like yeast or candida or something that is just overgrown in there and that's running rampant. So nothing else can sort of take its place. So you get rid of those guys, and then you seed. So you start putting in all the good bacteria. So whether that's a good probiotic and some stuff that the probiotic can grow on. So fermented foods like sauerkraut, kefirs. So they're sort of the substrate that can start to build that soil into this beautiful, fertile place. And then feed. So you're doing the food part. So putting in food that's whole, that has the good protein and nutrients, and that doesn't have all the additives and the bad stuff in there.
Amazing. I love that. Read, seed, and feed.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it's a slow and really delicate process too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow, so
Love that.
good. We've got another question from Jess. And Jess has a barley grass daily, a supplement of barley grass daily to stabilize a chemical imbalance. And she said it's helped her heaps with binge eating and reducing her obsessiveness around food. And she just wanted your advice on whether she should continue to use it or should it be a short-term supplement. And also she's just interested in hearing other benefits that can come from taking barley grass.
Okay. So when she says a chemical imbalance, that's interesting term. So I'm not sure whether that is a serotonin dopamine, like as in a bit of depression, anxiety, which can definitely be the case. And then when it comes into obsession and eating, and there's lots of areas of nutritional biochemistry and psychiatry. So if the barley grass is being used for that reason, then it's putting in lots of really good nutrients to balance those areas. So yeah, great. What she's saying in that it's working. So when someone says, should I keep taking something, and she's found a great benefit, yeah, absolutely. I think you just keep going with that, unless there's a cost factor or there's risks to it. And really there's not many risks with barley grass if it's a good source and it's not contaminated. She mentioned it curbing sugar imbalances. So that's something that chromium does beautifully. So the nutrient chromium, it's been used in sugar imbalance, and the barley grass has lots of those simple nutrients, but it's got good chromium in it. So that's probably what's helping her with that. And we talked earlier about just the alkalizing nutrients and those green chlorophyll-based nutrients that have magnesium in them, and chlorella, green barley grass is one of those too. If it's the shoots that you actually grow and cut off, and like wheatgrass that you throw in and blend, I mean, whenever you get something that's freshly sprouted and has its vital force and life energy and everything in it, that's the ideal way to eat food. So that's even got that extra beautiful part to it. So yes, keep going. There's no risks, and I think that's amazing that she's got such good results from that.
Yeah, it's
Awesome.
so amazing. We've just had another question come through from Shannon, and she's asking about, she has like tiny bumps all over her arms, legs, and stomach, and she's heard that it's linked to a gluten intolerance. Is this true? And she's just interested if there's what it is and if there's any way that she can fix it. She's hoping that her new lifestyle will help it, as she's not very happy with how it looks. Yeah,
sure. Dermatology is one of those areas that there's thousands of different skin conditions, so it's pretty tricky to guess what that is just by that description. But what is very common is that I don't know if anyone's ever felt the back of your arm, if you ever get the little bumpy parts, and that can start there, and it can be everywhere. That's called pilaris keratosis. That's actually they argue about the specific nutrients, but it's usually an essential fatty acid and vitamin C deficiency. So you often see increasing your good fats. We all need good fats, and the skin is essential for being able to heal and be well. And if there's any skin conditions, I always go hunting for zinc. So our zinc deficiency levels in Australia are extremely high, and
Wow.
we really need to have that zinc boosted up all the time. So when it comes to skin, essential fatty acids, so good evening primrose oil or fish oil, or, you know, and in the diet, you girls are looking, you know, promoting and helping people to change to is avocados and good fish. And so it contains all those good things. And then just boosting your vitamin C for a little bit too, and adding some zinc. So hopefully, if that's what it is, if it's just a rough, bumpy sort of feeling that started and sort of spread everywhere, then that might make a big difference. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Interesting about like the zinc deficiency and how that's coming up in Australia more. Is there something like that we can make sure that we're eating to boost our zinc, or is it mainly done through like a supplement?
Yeah, oysters are the zinc.
Okay.
You know, they're superfood. And when we're coming back to libido and testosterone, and, you know, they were the Casanova foods, weren't they? And it's, you know, one of those, they are. Well, it's one of the main reasons is because of the zinc content. So for normal male testosterone development, spermatogenesis and fertility, and that zinc is really, really important. So, you know, it's really easy to go Google zinc-rich foods and have a look through, but those shellfish and seafoods and oysters and some nuts have got that in there as well. So, yeah, but I find that being so deficient, often it's a matter of using some supplements as well for a while just to get the levels up. Yeah.
Awesome. God, that is so interesting.
All of it is so interesting.
Yeah.
I know.
I think we wanted to go into talking about like managing PMS, and also about anxiety. So we had those topics on there, and I know that you have lots to share on that. So I'm just going to let you talk, Rach.
Sure. Okay. I love this topic, and it's always that question of where to start, because it's so big and we could talk forever on it all. But I think the important thing to remember is, like what I said before about that pyramid, and these precious areas are at the top, which is our urine function and our ovarian function and our estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. So these hormones are there and they're balanced and they're well when the rest of our metabolic system as well. So when our adrenal glands, our cortisol's good, when our gut's healthy, and then our thyroid can work. So it's kind of like the icing on the cake. And genetically, that's understandable. So, you know, as an organism, if we were not in our optimum state of well-being, then we shouldn't be reproducing. We can't hold a pregnancy. We're not going to be fertile, and we're going to be all over the place. So you can see that's why that makes sense. So if someone comes in and there's just like, my periods are everywhere and I'm bloated and I'm irritable and angry, I've got acne, and I've, you know, all those things that we experience, you can play with those delicate hormones all you like without addressing sugar and adrenal glands and wheat and all these, you know, very baseline issues, and not get very far. So I think you've got to really look at that cortisol, then the gut, and then make sure the thyroid's, you know, working well, and then we can get a little bit more fussy on whether we need to balance the estrogen and progesterone. So simply, estrogen is well, let's talk progesterone first, because that one is the nice one. So progesterone is our calming hormone. It, you know, when we don't have it, we go through that part of our cycle where, actually, there's a good little picture of our cycle, I think. Let me show you. And I think it's irresponsible as a woman not to know this little chart and have an app on your computer where, or on your iPhone, where you track your cycle. So you
can we do that? There's some really good phone apps.
Yeah, we'll share it in the group.
Yeah.
Right, and they're free. And then, you know, like day 1 of your cycle is the first day of your period. And then you should ovulate at day 14. And if your cycle's longer than 28 days, then it's going to be the first part that varies, not the second half. So you can always know your ovulation date, and then your progesterone should be peak at day 21. And that's where we always test hormones. So you can test hormones in your blood or do saliva tests. And the blood tests are very basic. They give us, usually we do them at menopause to actually confirm that you're in menopause. They can be valuable if you have serious medical conditions. Like if you do have polycystic ovaries, if you have some kind of tumor, you know, something else nasty there, they can give us an indication of that. But as a test for just how you're going through the months, generally when you're young, it's not very useful. So we do salivary testing, and we have a look at particular types of your estrogen and the ratio of progesterone and estrogen, because it's these guys that counteract each other. So one's calming and soothing and keeps everything, you know, under control, and the estrogen is pushing and driving and growth. So if one of them's out of order, it's hard to tell which. The progesterone could be quite low and the estrogen's just running away on its own, or the progesterone could be normal but the estrogen's too high, so you've still got the same problem. So anyway, salivary hormones is something you can test and get a good idea of what's going on. Hormones are made of cholesterol. Did you know that?
No. I probably have read it, but didn't take that in.
Hugely complicated. This is your hormone pathway. So this is making estrogen, this is making progesterone, and this is cortisol. They all come from cholesterol, which is fat. So if you don't have good fats, you can't make these beautiful hormones. If you are making so much cortisol, you don't make the other guys. So it just all drives down the cortisol pathway, and your poor progesterone's left like flat in your boots. And then, so let me tell you what the progesterone symptoms are: angry, irritable, snappy, aching, bone ache, muscle aches, fluid retention, all those things that PMT brings on.
Wow. It's also interesting. It's all related too, isn't it? It's all connected.
It is, absolutely. So I think, the bottom line there is like progesterone and estrogen work very closely interactively, and they're like musical chairs. So your cells are sitting there doing their own thing, and you've got estrogen and progesterone acting on them, and they've got to be in the right ratio. So it's like musical chairs. There's only so many spots, and these guys have got to attach. So if we just keep feeding in sugar and caffeine and all the bad things and stressing out and not having good fats and enough nutrients that actually make them, like your vitamin B and your C and your zinc, then you're going to have no symphony of beautiful hormones. You're going to have a clanging rave party of like doof doof, you know, hormones coming in that just wreck you. So,
oh my God,
I want a symphony of hormones.
Yes,
God,
we all
it sounds
do.
so much nicer, doesn't it?
I guess we've touched on libido, and I don't know who asked the question or who brought that up, but maybe you could talk a little bit about that as we were just talking about hormones and things.
And oysters.
Oysters, yes.
Oysters,
everyone eat more oysters.
We'll have to put those in the next plan.
So look, libido is it is very much related to progesterone with testosterone, our DHEA as well. So these are the lovely nutrients that really get knocked off the quickest and the first. So there's an interesting recent study that has found that we can keep blaming hormones for libido, but they've found that, I can't even remember the figure, but that the majority in this study could be libido could be helped by addressing more depressive symptoms, more personal interaction, more communication and emotion. And so I think libido hits in that. I mean, there's some young people that it sort of just disappears for a while, or, you know, there's a time in your life where, you know, you can have surges and lulls. But the big libido problem sort of comes in after kids, when you're in that rush time and your progesterone and estrogen all sorts of come down. But I think really addressing those things is important as well. So, you know, getting either a good coach or a program, or reading books, or getting back in touch with, you know, what is really critical in communication and making connection. And because the one thing that I always remember is that the pheromones that we produce that create attraction and sort of you know, you get an attraction from someone as well because of the chemicals they produce and their pheromones. So it's such a tribal and really basal thing.
Yeah.
If you're on the pill or you're taking artificial hormones, they've found that these are actually altered and that we have completely different pheromones. So,
Oh my God.
you
I
know,
read that.
are we attracting someone different? Are we, you know, we're messing with all that. So it's really interesting. I think doing everything that we've talked about with adrenal health and looking at having that good fats and creating that space for yourself. So we talked when we first began about emotional healing and blocks and baggage and neuroplasticity and how we can change some of these old reactive behaviors that we have. And as women, we have these huge hang-ups about sex and libido, and it's such a big, important part of life that it's probably one of the best opportunities to really grow and to learn about yourself. So yeah, if libido comes up, sort of a push in there and go hunting and learn more about what's happening in your body.
Oh, so interesting. And then talking about like neuroplasticity, I mean, that is an amazing subject, and I'd love to hear more about that, Rach. Maybe that can be our last question because I know we are running out of time.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and especially like coming back to that emotional healing and how our thoughts and things can change our life.
Yeah, definitely. Probably a good way to talk about that in a short time that puts perspective. So when I worked in palliative care and in the hospital, and then I've done a lot of work with Patria King, you may have heard of. She's out of Sydney, and she's a naturopath who for 35 years has had a centre, a charity called Quest for Life. So she started working with terminal ill patients and then children with terminal illness in those last times of their life. And, you know, people used to say that must be really depressing, and how do you do that? That's so hard. And I actually had some time there where my best friend went through a battle with breast cancer, and she actually lost that fight. So that was a very intense time of that same sort of experience. And it gives you the opportunity to realize that when people are real and there's none of, you know, the rest of the bullshit that we worry about, the real truth comes out. Like, people want to live, they really want to communicate, and they get the best out of, you know, the minutes and the days they have. And it's, you know, you've probably heard those people say, you know, cancer's the best thing I've ever had. And some people get really angry and upset about that thought and idea because it's a massive journey. But anyone given the opportunity where they've got to step deep into some of the blocks and some of the emotions and some of the patterns that they've had all their life can just change things, you know, so drastically. So there's a book called Radical Remission, and they studied people who had had remissions from cancer that weren't expected. So they should have, you know, passed away with this, but for some reason they just defeated the odds and they were still living, you know, years and years past that. And there was nutrition and there was different herbs and supplements, you know, all sorts of basic things that weren't all the same. But one of the main areas were that they really got in touch with and went deep and healed and looked at their emotional health and their relationships. And I think from when we're tiny, we start to develop reactions to loss or abandonment, or, you know, and some in really traumatic ways, and others just in normal families, just with siblings or, you know, parents or school, you know, with bullying or different things that happen. And so whenever we go out into the world now, we have the same chemical reaction because we've set up a neural pathway that makes no sense logically. Why should I be anxious or afraid of this environment? You know, there's no threat, but something really deep just remembers that, and we get all those same reactions. So working with Quest for Life, I did the facilitation a few weeks ago at one of the programs. There's 25 women there, and just to share their stories and see, you know, their journeys and how brave they are to go really into that kind of work. And now with a lot of this work in neuroplasticity, we realize that we can change those pathways, that it's really simple with a bit of conscious awareness, like with meditation, and I think more guided imagery, guided visualization, rather than just empty meditation where we kind of don't know what we're doing. We can reset that. So instead of being reactive, to situations that we don't even know why. We just, you know, some reactions are just way out of proportion to what the situation was. We can actually be responsive. So we can understand that that triggered that feeling. That doesn't make sense. I'm going to rewire that. That's a roadblock that way. I'm going to make the pathway go this way now. And this is what I'm going to think about things in the future. And it takes a lot of trust and honesty to do that. But it's so powerful.
Wow.
Changes
So interesting.
drastically. Yeah.
Crazy.
So,
Oh
yeah.
gosh, we've like covered so much
Yeah.
tonight. I mean,
We've covered so much tonight, and I think the one thing that we can all remember is not to feel overwhelmed by all this information, but feel empowered by it, that we can make change after change over time and become the healthiest we've ever been. So it's exciting.
yeah, all this knowledge you've shared with us, Rach, like,
amazing.
It's just amazing, and I think everyone's just going to take it on board. And even if you make one small change from what you've heard tonight, I mean, that's epic. So yay for that. We're so grateful, Rach, for your time and like your words and your brain. And we'd love you to share with everybody where everyone can find more information on you and your programs and products and things like that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I have a website which is just my name, so it's drrachelwyndham.com, and I'm in clinic on the Gold Coast, but I'm trying to really get out and reach more people. So workshops and webinars like this. So, you know, one after one, and saying the same thing. Sometimes it's more valuable to share it on a bigger scale. So I have a small ebook on there, and it's exactly what you said. It's 8 simple steps to wellness, and it's basic, but it's powerful, and it actually makes such a difference to your health. And we didn't even talk about sleep. Sleep is even beyond cortisol. So I encourage you to really have a look and maybe start with sleep. But reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook. I'll be at Utopia next week after next at Brisbane. I think that's the same weekend that you're around the Gold Coast as well.
Oh, yeah. Is that the 7th?
It's a paleo. Yeah, it is.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
So
we'll have to try and catch up.
I'll be speaking there, and then I'm speaking in Melbourne in November. But yeah, just find me on the web.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Rach, again. And we're going to share that in the group and get some key messages from there. We'll listen to it again and write them all down, because I know that there's so much I want to action. But thank you again. It's been such a pleasure to have you part of Make Life Merry. We really appreciate it.
No, I love it. Love what you girls are doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Rach.
Okay, bye.